Hello and welcome to Worlds Apart. Data mining is crucial for doing business these days, but should the same tools that companies use to influence our choice of consumer goods be also applied while electing a president? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by Harper Reid, who served as the Chief Technology Officer for President Obama 2012 election campaign. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Now, I know that before joining the Obama campaign, you worked as the Chief Technology Officer for a clothing company, and you seem to have made a very smooth transition, but some people would feel a bit uneasy about applying some of the tech gimmicks and marketing tools to politics, because some of us still sort of feel deep down that politics shouldn't be conducted in the same way as commerce. Is that too idealistic?
Yes, it is.
Why is that?
Well, I think ultimately, when you're talking about a politician, you're talking about something. I mean, it's been marketing forever. Yes, I mean, it's all about going and knocking on a door, talking. I mean, ages ago, it was very community-based, but it was all about marketing. You know, this politician is the best for this reason, and so I think it's. What we're seeing now is, instead of us, you know, the technologists that help elect the president, we didn't, all we did is kind of help distribute his authenticity and the genuineness that he brought to more people. But
at the same time, in the United States, as far as I know, the return policy on goods is very liberal. You can always bring the product that you don't like back and get your money. But unfortunately, with politics, it doesn't work this way. You have to wait another 4 years.
But I think you're pushing too hard on the narrative that it's like a product. I do think that. It's true that you need to make sure that you vote for the right person, and you can't return that vote. But it isn't permanent forever. You know, in the U.S. it's 4 years. Other countries it's shorter. In many places it's for a mayor or a congressperson that might be a year or 2 years. But the thing that's important is the candidate themselves. You cannot use technology to make a bad candidate good. You can only elect a good candidate. But
Mr. Reid, let me push you on that. You just said that 4 years is not that long of a time, but in 4 years, you know, a war can happen. The country can get ruined, you know, like look at Syria. In 4 years, it's a difference between life and death. So a lot can happen in that period of time.
That's why you have to make sure you elect the right president.
But how do you really make sure if, as you just agreed, you're applying all that marketing tools to the political campaigns?
You're making a jump, and I think this is an important jump or a distinction, is that even with a product, if we're talking about a product, I can say that this is the best stereo, and I can use all the marketing in the world, but if the stereo sucks, it doesn't matter how much money I pour into marketing. I think that happens a lot with candidates, where you have candidates that aren't very good and you have candidates that are very good. And the people largely choose which one they want, regardless of the marketing. The marketing helps get the message out to a wider group. So it's more, especially in the US, this is huge, is that we did not convince any Republicans to vote for the president. We only got Democrats to vote. And so in the US, it's much more about turnout than it is about persuasion. So using these marketing tools, which were marketing tools, that's exactly correct. What we did is we reminded people that they should go vote.
But if people are not persuaded from the very beginning that they have to show up at the ballot box, why do we really need the vote of those people, especially in the world's biggest democracy?
But it's not about persuasion. Once again, it's only about turnout. So they already are persuaded to vote. They just happen to not vote. Maybe they are in a disenfranchised area where they're unable to make it to the polls, or the polls have been put further away. Maybe it's about education. It's about making sure that people aren't lied to. A lot of it is we have a very big department in the campaign that was called voter protection, specifically about making sure if people got in lines that they were eligible to vote, that they could vote. In the US, the most important thing is turnout. And if you remember that after the campaign, after we won, a lot of the dialogue was about how we got so many Black African Americans or Latinos to vote. Well, that shows that what we did is we stepped outside of where the Republicans were able to go, and we went there and we convinced more people to go vote. These tools that we built, these marketing tools, were much more about reminding people to vote. And sadly, Democrats are kind of lazy. We always forget to vote.
Now, I know that you volunteered for Obama's 2008 campaign. You were his CTO in 2012. And in your previous interviews, you said that you did it because you believe in Barack Obama. What is it in his candidacy that appealed to you personally?
In 2008, it was we all remember George Bush. And George Bush, in some cases was good, in some cases was bad, I think more bad. And I wanted a change. I wanted to change from that kind of status quo. And the president came and he gave us a lot of things that we wanted: health care, repealing Do Ask, Don't Tell, all sorts of really good things. I think a very positive first term, except it was the promises he made were two-term promises. And so for me, it was successful in the first term, but then I wanted to make sure that we got the job done. Mm-hmm. So that's why the second term was so important. And it also, I think it's a testament, his gray hair is a testament to how hard of a job it is. Mm-hmm. You look at all the past presidents of the U.S., they apparently instantly turn gray the moment they become president. Now,
interesting that you bring up the subject of hair, because any newspaper story that I read on you commented on your hairstyle, your choice of clothing, your glasses, your hipster look. And I think President Obama, I wouldn't call him hipster, but he looks and talks indeed a little bit different from the other American presidents, and you just mentioned his predecessor, but I wonder if the way he conducts his policy was really all that different.
I think it was more centrist than I think a lot of people had hoped. But if you look at the voting records and you look at kind of what he said during his first campaign, he didn't promise to be super left. He didn't say, I'm going to be the most liberal president in the history of the U.S. He was very centrist, and I think it was one of the problems that we saw was we all kind of put our hopes into this hope campaign, individually saying, this is what I think it should be about. Mm-hmm. And in some cases it worked, and in some cases it didn't, but I think that compared to the alternative, it has been incredible.
Now, you mentioned what attracted you in President Obama, and I assume you were converted to his camp in an old-fashioned way. I mean, you saw him probably on television, you read maybe some of his articles or his books. If you were converted in that old-fashioned way, why do you think other people need all that sophisticated use of technology to get them persuaded?
I don't think it's about conversion, once again. I think that it's really important to understand that the U.S. campaigns are very much not about persuasion. And so it's really not about, I'm going to go out and knock on someone's door and tell them something that they haven't heard already. With the 24-hour news cycle that we have in the U.S. specifically about politics, it's very hard to find someone who is undecided. We talk about undecided voters a lot in the campaign, and none of us knew any of them. Like, we would reach out to all of our friends and try and find an undecided voter, and we could never find them. What you did have is people who were maybe a little less interested in the Republican side or a little less interested in the Democrat side, and I think that's where the president came and flourished, where after Gore and after Kerry, a lot of us were a little bit less interested in the status quo Democrat candidate. Just less. We weren't suddenly, libertarians, or we weren't suddenly Republicans. We were just kind of like, And I think that's what you see a lot with the Republicans right now in the U.S., where they're not excited about some of the candidates. They're not excited about their candidates holding the government hostage, various things like that. And so they're just kind of like, So I think we're going to see in this upcoming election actually a very interesting race between very moderate, I would say normal Republicans, very moderate, I would say normal Democrats, trying to find a candidate that they can agree on. Because at the same time, when I think about the middle America, the normal, not the loud, Fox News America, the middle America, it's pretty reasonable. And they just want someone that they can agree with, and they just want someone who won't send their people to war. They want someone who will have good economic policies. They want all these things, and we found a lot of that in the president. But nobody knows what's going to happen in 2016.
But a lot of those things that you just mentioned depend not on the promises that are made on the campaign trail, but actually on the fulfillment of those promises. And some would argue that that use of technology puts a lot of emphasis on elections as if it is some sort of political transaction, rather than focusing on changing the nature of the presidency with the use of technology.
Yeah, I mean, and the president has done a lot to do that. His CTO right now, Todd Park, the previous CTOs as well, CIOs and CTOs have done a lot to help get more transparency to the various organizations that are in the government up to the White House. But Todd Park right now is the one that I'm excited about, because what he's doing is he's bringing in some people from the private sector to come in as innovation fellows to help guide this change, because you're absolutely correct. you can't just use high technology to get elected. You have to also use it to lead.
You also mentioned that one of your main objectives was bringing people to the polling stations, and one of the methods that you used, if I'm not mistaken, was to actually reach out to people who didn't vote at that time, and maybe do that through their Facebook friends or through some other venues. And to me, as somebody who was born in the Soviet Union, this sounds very creepy, because if you can use that to encourage people to vote, you can use that for all sorts of less
an example
noble
of this
things.
is how it worked. So my brother lives in Colorado. Colorado is a battleground state, so it was very important for us. When you'd go to the polls, they would shout out your name, and so someone would cross your name off a list. So unlike other countries, the US has an open voter registry that we can all see. And so as a candidate, you get access to the voter rolls, and you can look at that list and you can say, okay, this person lives in this part of Colorado, and then when they're crossed off, you can cross them off the list. Then at that point, we know that we don't have to go knock on their door to remind them to vote, because remember, it's all about turnout. Now, with that said, a nefarious organization could, if they wanted to, do the exact same thing to try and stop people from voting. Yes. However, that didn't happen.
But could that happen in the future?
Of course, but we could also get hit by meteorites, and we could get hit by lightning, and we could all die in helicopter crashes. All sorts of things could happen. But is it worth?
But it doesn't give you any reason, any pause to think that you were one of the first to pioneer.
Data is a
this,
tool.
Method.
Data is a tool, and it's a tool that can be used for good or bad, like all tools. Mm-hmm. And I choose to use data for good, and we did use data for good. And so to kind of wax poetic on whether it could be used for bad is we could have the same conversation about a knife.
Mr. Reed, we have to take a very short break now, but when we come back, the clever use of technology can help politicians get elected, but can the same technology be used to help the voters keep those elected in check? That's coming up in a few moments on Worlds Apart. Welcome back to Worlds Apart, where we are discussing politics and technology with Harper Reed, who used to work for President Obama as the Chief Technology Officer. Mr. Reed, I know that at some point of your life you got addicted to the so-called personal informatics, tracking your weight, your location, what have you, steps. And I wonder if it's possible to develop some sort of application that would allow ordinary voters to assess politicians' performance on the yardsticks that they are personally interested in, to keep politicians in check.
There's a few really good organizations that are doing this right now. One of my favorites is ProPublica in the United States. It's doing a lot of work to build software around journalism and politics to try and make sure that the people we're electing are actually doing the things and saying the things and are fact-checked. I think that's a really good summary of it. Because a lot of times, especially when it comes to Congress, you have a lot of words that are being said, and there's so much just kind of BS, you never know what's real. And so there's a lot of good organizations that are doing this. And excitingly, it's all third parties. There's some for Republicans, there's independents, and there's Democrats. And so you can really find a good amount of software and data about whether the people you're electing are doing the job that you elected them to do.
Now, I was following your Twitter feed recently over the Obama website fiasco, and for those of our viewers who are not familiar with that, there's been major difficulties with the U.S. healthcare website, and thousands and some possibly even millions of people haven't been able to register and get those services. Now, you wrote in one of the tweets that you gave an advice to the government, quote, "Focus on user experience, little wins that give users a feeling of progress. Meanwhile, spend time fixing the back end." And I think that's ultimately a recipe for any government in any country. Just focus on user experience, and if you want to be successful.
We hired the first user experience full-time professional on the campaign in 2011 in the history of campaigns. And because user experience is one of the most important professions that you can have in technology. And the reason is because it turns an app that is functional. It just works. It works, but it makes it usable. So it makes it that people want to use it. It makes it so when people use it, they tell their friends about it. And healthcare.gov is so important. It's so important to give all these people healthcare that it has to be usable. And I don't think that user experience I'm sure it was thought about, but I don't think it was thought about a lot. And now that it's not working, What can they do to make it so when I go there to try and sign up, that I don't feel like I've failed at it? You know, maybe it just pops up a thing that just maybe is a little more friendly. There's a lot of ways to do it, and it's and you know that comment, although was about healthcare.gov, it was mostly targeted towards the people, the armchair kind of quarterbacks who are sitting back and kind of thinking about how to fix things.
Mm-hmm. But given the difficulties that the Obama administration had rolling out the Obama healthcare website, there seems to be one area where they experience absolutely no glitches at all, and I'm talking about the NSA spying on not only the American citizens but also the rest of the world. I assume that something on this scale would require access to a lot of tech expertise and a fairly wide pool of talent. Were you personally surprised by how elaborated and sophisticated that scheme is, especially given, again, the difficulties of rolling out a decent healthcare website?
I don't know anything about the insides of either one, so it's really hard to actually compare them. But I know a little tiny bit about government procurement and how to get work in the government, and I am guessing, and this is purely a guess, that the NSA stuff is just as bad. I mean, because if you think about when you log in to a government website in any country, it's never good. Is it? Ever.
No, but my idea, I may not have expressed it eloquently, is that it seems that whenever you're dealing with services that are required by people, millions of people, you're having major issues.
Let me say it back to you. So your question is more, why is it that the NSA can apparently roll out mass surveillance and not have bugs? I think that I don't know anything about either of them enough to comment really, but if I were to guess, I would say they probably both have as many bugs, except the NSA one you can't log into. So you don't see them, because government technology doesn't work. Procurement doesn't work. When you have these giant organizations building things, they oftentimes fail.
But then we're able to maintain that program for quite a number of years.
I mean, but we don't,
keep it secret.
Well, keeping it secret is much easier than building software. And so building good software that users can use. And if you think about, let's just imagine if I was to build software described by Edward Snowden, very few people would log into it, yes? Like not hundreds of millions. It would integrate with very small number of systems. It would just be collecting data. This is all, I mean, so I think they're not really worth comparison, but the question you ask is interesting. But I think the answer goes back to procurement. Who's building these things? And the problem with healthcare.gov is that the people building them have maximized their talent on getting a contract, not maximize their talent on getting technology done.
Mm-hmm. You seem to be focusing on the technical side, but in one of your previous interviews, I heard you say that one of the most exciting things for you about President Obama was how he puts his values into the, how his values are reflected in the people he hires, and you try to also build those values into the way you conduct the campaign. Do you think his values are maybe also reflected in this massive surveillance operation that is going on?
We don't know any specifics about the NSA stuff, which I'm not for by any means. However, we do know that it started pre-September 11th. So since it started that long ago, I don't think that the entire program is based on the president's values. Now the question is, and this is a question that I put to anyone, is when we're talking about defending against terrorism, which ultimately I think is a catch-22, right? Because you don't want to take a program away that is saving people and creating a safer environment. But at the same time, I truly believe that we all have right to internet freedom. I believe we shouldn't be surveilled, etc. But it's very hard for me to say there should be none of that if it is in fact making the world a better place. So the question that I have for anyone is, how do we prove that either it is working? Because if it's working, then the conversation's suddenly very different. And if it is working, my worry then is scope creep, because data when it comes to mass surveillance has not necessarily played well when we look at history. And my worry is that the scope creep is my worry.
Mm-hmm. Well, it leads me to my next question. In one of your recent op-eds in the New York Times, you said that we've done things that transformed elections, but we now need to work to carry out transforming the government. And I wonder, how far do you think that process should go? It's one thing to build a good campaign or a functioning healthcare website, but would you be in favor of, for example, of a digital democracy, people weighing in on all sorts of subjects?
I think that I am a big believer in hope. And so I think that we could take a very negative view of many of these things, and we could say, yes, if we allow everyone to comment, it's just going to be terrible. But I don't think that will happen. I think that it can be very positive. I think that adding more technology, allowing more people to participate will be positive. And if you look at what the internet has done all over the world, worldwide, it has democratized access to information. And so the fact that I can post a blog and you can comment on it, my mom can comment on it, and some young person in South Africa can comment on it.
But it's not just about commenting, it's about deciding whether your country has to bomb Syria, for example. I mean, that's a crucial issue.
So let's get to that point. But we're not at that point now. We can't use the internet to do digital democracy.
Why not?
Well, the technology is not there.
But voter registration would allow that. We can have digital IDs. You can have those digital elections once every 4 years.
But aren't you worried about digital IDs?
I don't know. I'm asking you.
I'm not. So I think we can get there, but I don't think we can get there today because I don't think it's going to work today. Because I don't think that the establishment of all countries want that.
But in principle, do you think that's even possible, not just for the Americans, but for democracy in any other country, to actually get people involved in that process on such a substantial level?
Yes.
Because it could make politics totally dysfunctional.
Or it could make it work very much better. I mean, I think that I think in the US we come from a different place when it comes to data and the internet. And we don't have a lot of the aggressive historical or cultural history that shows how data can be abused. And so when we come...
Well, you certainly do now.
No, but we don't. I mean, sort of. But we don't have any... no one sees the ramifications in the US.
Is it because people are just not informed enough, or they simply don't care?
I don't know. I think they don't care. I really don't know. I don't understand it.
But if people don't care and you give them all that power in making those very consequential decisions, can you imagine where it's going to lead all of us, not just your country, but the rest of us as well?
I mean, I can't comment on it because I don't know, right? But I do know that I am a little disappointed in my peers in the U.S. because many of them don't care as much as others do. And there's a lot of people who do care. Like there's a good group of people who are standing up, doing a lot of documentation, a lot of that. But I do think there are opportunities for the internet to continue to democratize access to everything. Mm-hmm. And so we can create a world where we're democratizing access to all the good things. We can create a world where it's only fear and being driven by fear. And I choose the positive route.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you're in favor of the unmonitored use of the internet for everyone, but I wonder if you think that's really an achievable goal at this point of time, because there is a lot of digital inequality in the world. Some countries are far ahead technologically than others, and I wonder if you can really ensure that...
Well, when you make a list of all the countries with fast broadband, the United States is not number one. So I think that there is a lot of digital inequality in the world. I think there's also a lot of general inequality in the world. And I think I would like to increase, I would hope that by giving more access to more information, more access to more education, more access to early childhood education, et cetera, that we can create a better world for everyone. Obviously, people also need water. So, there's a lot of problems in the world that need to be solved. I personally can help solve technology.
Well, you can help solve technology for political campaigns, and hopefully the way you change this world is through politics. But you mentioned some of the reservations about Americans and how informed or involved they are in the world affairs. Did you have any of those reservations when you were allowing a candidate of your choice to take power? Because
but you're very adversarial about somehow I allowed the candidate.
Well,
I chose to work for the best candidate that we had, which I supported 100%. And there's many choices that the government has made that I don't necessarily agree with. But there are a majority of the choices that the government has made that I do definitely agree with. And so, do I like everything? No. Do I like almost everything? Yes. Am I happy that I have friends that are in Afghanistan? No. Do I hope that maybe that will make the world a better place? Yes. Could I have made a different choice? Sure, but I think I made the right choice. And so we can go in this circle where apparently I made the wrong choice for you, and I don't think it's going to get anywhere because I disagree.
Well, you're entitled to your choice regardless of my opinion, but I guess my point was that going back to the NSA program, your country is the leading democracy of the world, and obviously the fate of the rest of the world may be somewhat dependent on who is elected in the United States. So if you felt so passionately about him back then, obviously that entitles you to some sort of responsibility, even though I don't say that in an adversarial way.
I think it entitles me to some responsibility, and I'm not claiming that. I think it's important to note, as I said, that these programs started well before the president came into power. And so the responsibility that I have is to make sure the best person is in control of this power, yes? And so if I'm constantly double guessing myself, then that's not electing a leader. You elect a leader so that you hope that they will do good once they have that power. And of course I can say, I wish things would be different. Like when the Patriot Act happened in the early 2000s, I was very frustrated. When all of this surveillance obviously started, when it got outed in 2006 or 2008, very frustrated. When Edward Snowden's revelations came about, yes, of course, very frustrated. That doesn't mean that the president is suddenly a bad president. That means that the president has more responsibilities than we thought. And so I hope that he makes the right choices, and I trust him to do so.
Well, Mr. Reed, thank you very much for your perspective. And if you like the show, please join us again, same place, same time, here on Worlds Apart.